Morning, everybody. How are we doing this morning? So I want to go over something with you guys. Go over this article. Bryan Kohberger was fired from WSU teaching job days before the Idaho murder arrest, report says. Okay? Bryan Kohberger was facing, we'll read the article. I'll pause and discuss a couple of things I want to talk about. Bryan Kohberger was facing disciplinary action in his teaching assistant job at Washington State University around the time of the murders of 4 University of Idaho students before he was ultimately fired from the position days before his arrest. It's just odd to me that when it first came out, it was like nobody had any inkling of this guy at all, da-da-da. And all of a sudden, it's this kid who's acting crazy, treating women like fucking shit, and being called in multiple times. But let me read first. The 28-year-old criminology PhD student began working as a teaching assistant in the criminology department in August as part of his graduate program. Well, pause right there. Another part of the graduate program was him also helping out as a public information officer at the local police department as well, in disseminating information, etc., dealing with the interactions between the police and students, etc., evaluation and dissemination and how they could do better, etc. So if he was, doing everything else he needed to do as part of the graduate program, why wouldn't he be doing that part? He would be. But within a month, he was already under investigation by the university because of behavioral problems and a sexist attitude towards women. That's weird that we don't hear this anywhere from anything from DeSales University. The outlet obtained a detailed timeline of his issues in the department. What department? The criminology department, that also is connected to the law enforcement, revealing that Mr. Kohberger was warned multiple times about his behavior and was brought into several meetings with professors due to their concerns. His attitude towards women was cited as a key concern, with the criminal justice student allegedly being rude to women, grading the women that he taught differently than the men, and having a sexist attitude towards females he interacted with at the school. In his brief 4-month stint as a teaching assistant, Mr. Kohberger also reportedly got into multiple altercations with one of the professors, Professor John Snyder. The first altercation took place on 23 September, and he was called in to meet the professor to discuss his behavior on October 3rd. But his behavior only escalated, with reports of him becoming increasingly feisty and belligerent and getting into arguments with professors in the run-up to the murders. Pause right there. Why is none of this behavior cited at DeSales University? It's like he had impeccable behavior up until he left DeSales University. Was Bryan Kohberger created? Was this a creation of some sort? Of some creation of Dr. Ramslin creating a killer? I don't know. It's just odd to me that they're saying that he's doing everything else he's supposed to be doing up to obtain his PhD. Well, then he would also be assisting a police department as a public information officer. I mean, just saying. Less than 2 weeks later, on the 13th November, the 28-year-old is accused of stabbing to death Ethan Chapin, Xana Kernodle, Maddie Mogan, and Kaylee Goncalves in the student's home just over the Washington border in Moscow, Idaho. In the aftermath of the slayings, the university continued to note his concerning behavior. But not one noted concernable behavior at DeSales University? This doesn't make sense to me, guys. And then you have world-renowned Catherine Ramslin as his professor, and she has not note one incidence of any of this. All of a sudden, it's like he gets released from DeSales, or leaves DeSales, and it's just this loose fucking cannon. Was somebody bridling him? Was somebody, containing his behavior? Mr. Koberger attended a meeting with the professor about the improvement plan on 7th December before getting into yet another altercation with him 2 days later. Does this seem like the same kid that was at DeSales University? It does not to me. The professor condemned his behavior, writing to the accused killer that it was apparent that you have not made progress regarding your professionalism. And again, if he had any history of this apparent behavior, he would not have been considered for the PhD program at DeSales, being in the positions he would be in, assisting the police department, being a teaching assistant. All those things carry weight. Days later, on 30 December, he was arrested at his parents' home near the Poconos Mountains and charged with the horrific quadruple homicide. He is now being held behind bars back in Moscow, awaiting his prelim hearing in June. The revelation comes as law enforcement officials in 2 separate Pennsylvania counties revealed that they have been sifting through unsolved cold cases looking for any potential ties to Mr. Koberger. The suspect, now facing the death penalty for 4 counts of murder, grew up in Albrightsville, PA, and only had moved to Washington State in the summer of 2022 to begin his graduate program. He has no prior criminal record, but Northampton County District Attorney Terrence Hook told King 5 that his staff was exploring the possibility that Mr. Koberger had struck before in the county where he went to community college. Mr. Huck said nothing with respect to Koberger has come about in our investigation of cold cases or unsolved cases at this point, but we always continue to investigate and pursue leads. For the 4 years before Mr. Koberger moved to Washington, he studied criminology at DeSales University. While there, he studied under renowned forensic psychologist Catherine Ramslin, who interviewed the BTK serial killer and co-wrote the book Confessions of a Serial Killer, the untold story of Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, with him. He also carried out a research project to understand how emotions and psychological traits influence decision-making when committing a crime. No connections had yet been made between Mr. Koberger and unsolved crimes in Lehigh County, said Mr. Martin. There was one prior contact between police and Mr. Koberger where he called 911 to report his car being locked behind a parking gate on a bike trail. No motive has been given for the attack on 13 November, and officials have not confirmed what connection Koberger had, if any, to the victims. The affidavit released in January revealed that the investigators believe Mr. Koberger may have stalked the student's home in the run-up to the mass murder with cell phone data, placing him around the property 12 times before 13 November. At the time of the murders, investigators believe Mr. Koberger turned his cell phone off in order to try to avoid detection. However, cell phone data places him close to the home on King Road at around 9 a.m. on 13 November, suggesting that he returned to the scene of the crime just hours after allegedly murdering the 4 victims at around 4 a.m., the affidavit reveals. As well as cell phone data, the affidavit reveals that other evidence also led them to arrest Mr. Koberger for the student murders. Police said that his DNA was also found on a knife sheath left behind at the scene by the killer, and his white Hyundai Elantra was caught on surveillance footage at the crime scene at the time of the murders, the affidavit reveals. No, the affidavit reveals that the DoorDash driver's car was caught on surveillance footage at the crime scene at the time of the murders, not his white Elantra, so that is not making sense to me. One of the victim's surviving roommates was also able to partially describe the killer to investigators after she came face to face with him in the aftermath of the murders. How do you know it was in the aftermath? How do you know that? In January, police in Washington unsealed search warrants for Mr. Koberger's apartment in Pullman and his office at Washington State University. Pause, with both revealing nothing, but we won't go there. The searches were carried out on 30 December, the same day as he was taken into police custody in PA. The unsealed documents reveal that investigators seized a string of items from his home, including possible human and animal hair strands, a disposable glove item with the red and brown stains, and a computer. No items were seized from his office, which he shared with other PhD students. The murder weapon, a fixed blade knife, was not recovered during the searches and is still unclear where it may be. Mr. Kohberger is next scheduled to appear in court on 26 June for his preliminary hearing. There's a lot of information in this article, guys. A lot of information. So he had a brief 4-month stint of teaching. What about a brief 4-month stint as a public information officer at the police department? So what this raises more questions for me. It raises the question of why when at DeSales University there is not one instance of any noted odd behavior between him and any type of professors, him and any type of women. Now all of a sudden he moves to Washington, and all of a sudden we have this loose incel cannon fucking killer. How can you help me understand this? Again, was Kohberger created by Ramslin and BTK? Was he created to go off to Washington State and become a serial killer? I don't know. But we're allowed to speculate over here. Don't shoot the messenger. Just taking the information we have at hand and looking at it in a different way. What do you guys think? Like, subscribe, and share.